Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing amazing and welcome back to our channel. In our today's video, we will do some configuration setup once we have done the installation of Git in our system. And we will also see how we can create a local repository, and also following to that we will connect our local repository with a remote repository so that we set up our whole environment in order to continue doing more exploration of Git commands and different other operations using Git and GitHub. So let's get started. First of all, if you haven't installed Git in your system, I would suggest you to go to git-scm.com/downloads, and you will come over this screen from where you can download Git for your specific operating system of your device. So in my case it's Windows, so I would normally go into Windows, and as I want the installation of Git to be a standalone software, and I will simply click on 64-bit Git for Windows setup because my system is also 64-bit. I could also get this portable version of Git. So once you have done that, what we will do, you can simply search for a Git bash, so it gives you this prompt. So if you open Git bash, you will get a prompt something like this, where you will see that it's a different bash terminal. So we will be using this bash terminal to do further configurations. Okay, so first thing first, as we have got our Git bash up and running, the first thing we will do is setting the global configurations for our Git commits. So we will type git config dash global user dot name, and then I will set a username, let's say university assistant, and those will be inside this double quotation. I'll press enter, and then I will also set up the user email. So git config dash global user email, and then in double quotation we will say the email that we want to use. Now remember that when we'll be doing our commit, basically these username and user email will be stored as well. And you might be wondering why, because if, let's say, if you are working on a group project, right, so you want to know who has made what sort of changes, so we will be able to track all those changes by the username and user email, as these will be recorded in each of the git commit. Next thing that I would like to do is changing the branch name. Now, before I do that, let's see what are the other configurations that we already have. So we can type this command git config dash list, and it will list all the configurations, the global configurations that we have in this machine. For example, we have these default branch as master. Ideally I have changed it earlier as main, and we just added the user email and username for the global configurations. Now if you want to change the master branch, which I believe that if you are doing it for the first time, you will see that you only have this default branch is equal to master, you don't see this default branch is equal to main. In order to change that, what we can do is using the command called git config dash global init dot default branch main, and if I do that, it will set up the default branch as main. Just remember that this master and main is basically the same concept. This is the key, or the main branch that we work on. Now git by default set up master as the main. However, when we will work on GitHub branches, you will see that we only see main as the core branch name. And also when you try to install Git in your system, you might see at one point Git is asking you to set up the main branch. So in that option, by default it will select master as the branch name. So if you want, you can change that over there as well. If I now want to get a specific value of any of these keys, each of these I can also call the key so that I can see the value of that. And in order to do that, how can we do? For example, git config, and I want to see the username, so I can type user dot name, press enter, and it will give me the username. Now there are other global configurations that we can make as well, but we are not going into that detail because these are the basic, configuration that you might be using. Okay, so now as we have done the configuration, let's create a quick Git repository. So the command that we'll be using is git init, but before I do that, let's create a directory. So mkdir, my first project is going to be the folder name. So I'm inside the folder that I have created, so I can call git init, and git will initialize an empty directory. And as you can see that I also can see the current branch I am in, which is main. So now we have created a directory. Let's do git let's do ls. We can see that we don't have anything inside, but if we do ls minus a, which will also show us any hidden files or folder, you can see that we have this .git directory. So if you remember, in our previous videos we have talked about the local repository, which is basically this .git directory. So if I go into cd.git and do ls, I will see that all those different file and different folders we have, that literally helps Git to track all those changes that we make. Okay, so let's create a file over there. So let's create a file called test.txt. So if I do a status check, I can use this command called git status. So now Git shows that there is one untracked file. So if you remember, we said that when we create a new file, it by default stays in a untracked state. So in order to add it in a staging area, we will use the command called git add. So I will say git add dot, that means add everything in my current directory, and I will say once that is done, I will go into commit. So I will do git commit minus m for message, and the message I will say is added a text file. Now this message could be anything that you want to add. For now, if you don't understand these, don't worry. I will have another video where I will explain all of these in detail. So press enter. So now we have created a file, we have added the file into the staging area, we have done a commit. Now Git knows about the commits or the changes that we have made in our local repository. So if I do git log, I will see that Git created a commit, hash for the commit that we made, and also it points out the head pointer to our main branch, as we have worked on our main branch. And if you remember, when we did ls in the .git directory, we had this head file as well over there. So head is basically the pointer that tracks where our current point is in the the git log. Also, we can see who is the author who has done this commit. So we can see the author's username and user email and the date, and also the commit message that the user has added. So if you are using as a single person for this project. You remember we say that you only need this local repository unless you want to keep or store your changes to your remote repository as well. So if you are not interested in remote repository, you can simply use these git add and git commit in order to continue doing your work. So for example, if I want to get more changes, for example, if I say nano and the test.txt, so let's make some changes. Maybe this is the first text file. I will do Control S to save and Control X to exit. So now I have made some changes, right? So let's do a git status again. So I can see that now test.txt file has been modified. So we can use some of this command like git add to send it to the staging area for the next commit, or we can also do git restore and the file name in order to discard all of these changes in the current directory. For example, we can see it's modified, right? So if we do git restore and then test.txt, and now if we do a git status, so you see there is nothing to be committed, right? So the working tree is clean. So what we basically did is we restored our changes from the staging area to the working directory. Okay, so I will quickly add that information again. So let's get back to nano. Control S, Control X to save and exit. So now if I do git status, something has been modified. So let's do git add dot, and I will do git commit. I will give a commit message, so modified file, and now it's been saved for as our next commit as well. So again, if you are not concerned about sending all those changes to a remote repository, all you need is git add and git commit, and then if you make any sort of changes, you again repeat the same procedure, git and then git commit. That would be all. But however, if you want to send all those changes to your remote repository, we need to use this git push command. But before we do a git push command, there has to be some some sort of connection between the remote repository and the local repository. Okay, so now that we have our local repository working, so what we will do, we will make a connection between our local repository and the remote repository. So let's get back to the terminal. So let's see what happens if we try to do a git push. So it says that git push has like no configuration for the push destination, right? So local repository does not know what is the destination we are trying to send all those changes. So we need to set up the remote for our repository. So what we need to do is we need to go to the remote repository. It could be your GitHub account, GitLab account, or Bitbucket, whichever you are using. So I will go into my GitHub account and I will create a new repository. So I will give it as my test project, and everything I will keep it as default for now. So let's create repository, and this will bring up a page something like this. So what we will do is, as we have a existing repository in our local system, so all we need is this 3 step. So let's get back our terminal. So the first thing we will do is adding this remote origin. So if you remember, git remote add and the origin and the URL of that project. So if we do these, so now basically we are giving origin as the remote repository and the repository link as well. So we will press enter, and next we will set up main as the main branch. And now we will try to do push in our origin main branch, which is our remote repository. So if I try to do push, I will get a prompt where I will have to, you know, authenticate the connection in order to, make changes to my remote repository. So once I press enter, I will get a prompt like this. So let's do sign in with your browser, and it will ask us to give our credentials. So give your GitHub user email and the password and click on sign up, and that will give the authentication. So now we can close this and go back to the prompt, and once we go there you will see that Git has now pushed all those changes into the remote repository. So if we refresh this GitHub page now, we'll be seeing that all those changes that we have made is now available in our remote repository. So in this way we can connect our remote repository with our local repository. So now we are all ready to do further Git commands and explore how Git and GitHub works in real world. Alright, so that will be all for this video, and I hope you liked this, and if you do so, please give it a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.